applying common sense is in our priorities of the department. First is we're reviving the warrior ethos. We want to get rid of the distractions and the debris. No more DEI. No more dudes in dresses. No more climate change worship and social justice and political correctness. We're done with that. We're unleashing the warfighter to be ready, trained, disciplined, accountable, and lethal. When you allow them to do that, they're incredibly good at their job. As the world has seen and as a indicted criminal in Venezuela found out about a week ago, what America can do is like no other country in the world.
Let's just jump ahead slightly here to talk about regime change. So America's got a pretty checkered history with regime change. There's three ways they tend to go about it. There's the hidden and quitted approach, which we're already kind of seeing Trump talk about. I mean, he's kind of talking about the attack on Maduro in the past tense. He's kind of moved on. I know there's always the threat that he might come back for the new president, but we'll see. But the hidden and quitted approach, that was used in Libya. They got Gaddafi, they got out of there. But then the power vacuum, which you raised before, I mean, in many ways, Libya's now worse off. So that's one approach that's possible. The second approach that's possible is we're here until it's all figured out. Trump's also raised this as a possibility, this idea that we're going to be controlling the oil until it's all figured out. Who knows what figured out means? I mean, we went into Afghanistan and Iraq because we were going to be there until democracy was figured out, and then that was a disaster as well. And then there's the third option, which is we're going to get the guy we don't like, we're going to install him with someone we do, and then the country's just going to figure it out. South Americans know this well, obviously. This was the approach they had with Pinochet, and then Pinochet turns out to be horrible as well. So what are you hoping that America's approach is going to end up being as someone with a deep affinity for Venezuela? And then what do you think Trump's approach is going to be as someone that's responsible to US taxpayers?
I think the reality is that none of us know what's going to happen. That I think we have to be honest about that and go, at this point, none of us know. I think Delcy Rodriguez is going to be in charge for 90 days. So she has a 90-day interim period. And I think the reason why they didn't remove the entire government is because it would have destabilized the country too much, and there was a potential to go for it to descend into chaos. If you look at what the Americans did, and what we did, and its allies did in Iraq or in Afghanistan, they had this kind of rather idealistic, it was incredibly idealistic idea that we were going to bring democracy. We were going to bring democracy and Western liberal values to countries like Iraq, Afghanistan, and others, which is, to put it bluntly, demented. It's a completely different culture. These countries are essentially arbitrary lines on a map where different warring tribes are essentially permanently engaged in conflict with one another along racial and also religious grounds. Venezuela is slightly different to that. So people comparing Venezuela to those countries, for me, it's a lazy comparison. Venezuela has had democracy. Our last dictatorship ended in the mid-60s. Ever since then, we've had a democracy. Now, admittedly, it's a highly corrupt democracy. You can argue whether democracy actually worked for the country, but it was a form of democracy nevertheless. If you remember, Chavez was democratically elected. Now, we've had a dictatorship for the best part of 27 years, but that doesn't mean that we can't go back to a democracy. But if I'm being honest with you, I don't think Trump or his cronies particularly care about that. I don't think they care about having a government that cares about Venezuelan people. I don't think they particularly care that they have a government who looks after its people and cares for them. I think what they care about most of all is that there is a government in place in Venezuela that is on board and on side with the Americans and lets them get the oil and extract it and sell it and is a good business partner. I don't think they particularly care about regime change, if I'm being brutally honest.
Yeah, because that is, going back to Trump criticism, that is the one from the left. We've seen the protests anti what's happened here coming from, obviously, people that have never been to Venezuela, but people saying that this is just a naked oil grab, hands off the Venezuelan people. You're saying they might have somewhat of a point? I think, look, it's definitely about oil. It's about resources. It's about the fact that you had, like I said before, a dictator who wasn't playing ball. Trump, at his core, is a pragmatist. I wouldn't say he's ideological in the way that the Republican Party used to be, who are avowedly neoconservative. I think he's far more pragmatic than that. What I think he wants is a Venezuela that is not going to be a threat to America, that's going to play ball, and that is going to allow its oil and its resources to be mined and is going to be able to conduct business. America has never had a problem with dealing and working with despotic regimes, evil dictators, as long as they operate and work within American interests. I just think that's the simple reality of it. There's a large part of me that would love for a better government to come in and, govern properly and give Venezuelan people hope and dignity back. I really do. As we stand now, I'm not sure how realistic that is. There is one criticism that I'm actually quite partial to, which is the idea that Trump just bypassed Congress. So this was defended by the Trump and Rubio as going, it's not an act of war. This is, it's basically a criminal case. We went in, we got the guy that the Justice Department wanted, and we got out of there. We didn't declare war. I can't get on board with that. I think if Australia came and just kidnapped Keir Starmer, I think you personally might be helping our troops find where he is. But I think as a country...
You're welcome to him, mate.
Yeah. You'd be like, it's that room there. No, the one on the left. But I think once he'd come down from the adrenaline rush of finally getting rid of Keir Starmer, you would have to acknowledge that on some level, Australia and the UK would be at war. We stole your leader. I mean, if Venezuela went in and stole Trump, game on. I just think this is something that the US Congress should have been notified about. This is something that everyone needs to be on the same page on. How do you feel about that?
Look, as somebody who is half Venezuelan and has South American heritage and understands a little bit of the history of the region, America has been involved in regime change for longer than both of us have been around. They have been involved in regime changes since how can I put this? For the last 100 or so years. So the reality is this is a very American play. Should they have gone through Congress? Yeah, they should have done, quite possibly. But the reality is that that's never how America has behaved. That's never how America has behaved to Latin America in particular, which is one of the criticisms that Latin America has always leveled at the United States, which is we are your playthings. You impose governments in us, dictatorships in us, which are cruel, brutal, and barbaric, but you don't care as long as they act within your interests. That's always been the way. So the fact that this has happened is only surprising if you don't know history. That's the reason that there was communist revolutions, because there was always a feeling in these countries that they were getting a raw deal and they weren't in charge. They weren't the masters of their own destiny, shall we just say. So I understand why you say that they should have followed protocol, but the reality is, historically, is this has always been the relationship between the Americans and the Latin Americans.